I've got water and everything, right?
Yep. All right, well, good morning, everyone. Kia ora koutou. Welcome to this Retail NZ webinar on crime prevention activities. I'm really pleased to be here in Auckland with Matt Tierney from New Zealand Police. Matt is the head of the National Retail Investigation Support Unit, and he's going to share some of his expertise with us this morning. So thank you all for joining us. Please note we are recording this session, so it will be available for you to come back to and have another look at if you need to down the track. And we will have an opportunity for questions. So if you have any questions that you'd like raised or answered, please just use the chat function at the bottom of your Zoom screen and we'll attend to those as we go. So Matt, thank you for joining us today.
Good morning all, how are you?
So today we're going to cover off some of the key practical steps you can use to keep your store and your team safe while mitigating the impact of crime and looking at prevention. We're going to deal with store layout, physical design, and how that can help you increase safety for your team and your customers. But Matt, to begin, I thought the investigation support unit at police is relatively new. Do you just want to give us a quick overview of what you're doing and how it's going?
Yeah, so the investigations or the Retail Investigation Support Unit was launched by the Commissioner in November 2021, and myself and another member started at the end of January. We had investigators in place by the end of May, early June this year. And we are predominantly focusing on retail theft because the higher levels of associated retail crime are being dealt with at the criminal investigation branch level, so detective level. But this is a new initiative by police, and never before has there been so much attention focused on this level of crime, basically in the retail sector. We've had, to date, I did some stat counting a couple of weeks ago, we've had nearly 40 arrests and over 200 charges against those individuals, and an extremely high monetary value that these people have been causing to the retail sector in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. We had one organised crime unit alone, which was responsible for at least $72,000 worth of retail crime. That's the crime that we know about, but obviously there's probably more in relation to that. One of the biggest successes that we've had is, and it kind of proves to us that we're targeting the right people, and that is the most violent and aggressive offenders within the New Zealand retail scene, is that our incarceration rate is in the high 80s. So that is when we're dealing with a person, they're either remanded into custody awaiting sentencing, or they're on either 24-hour bail or 24-hour or evening curfew. Why this is crucially important is that it removes them completely from the crime picture. So not only are they unable to commit crime against the retail sector, but they're also unable to commit crime full stop. And that's a really important thing for us.
Cool, thanks, Matt. So moving on to perhaps some of the practical advice that people have tuned in for today. I guess, probably good to start from the outside as you're looking at a store and you're looking at the front of a shop from the footpath. What are the key things do you think that a retailer needs to be considering about the external environment of a store, and what can they do to help try and deal with some of the crime issues before they happen?
Absolutely. The external of the store is really, really important. Simple things like cleaning graffiti once it's been put in place, keeping the outside of your store tidy, whether that's mowing lawns, picking up rubbish, or decluttering windows. What it does is it promotes an ownership of the property, and it has a positive appeal to the community as well. So what you'll actually find is that the more appealing that your store looks from the outside, you'll not only will you decrease crime, but you'll also increase your patronage to your store as well.
So, and what about windows? If you've got suppliers who have provided window decals or other promotional signs for your storefront, what's your view on those, Matt?
As a retail person, you really need to be able to see what's going on in front of your store and who's approaching your store. We've got many examples where people have said to us that they've seen a group of people approaching that has looked a bit suspect, and they've closed the front door, and subsequently nothing's happened. Now, whether or not those people were actually going to do anything, we'll never know. But you're better to be safe than sorry. And had those hoardings, if you want to call them that, been put on the windows, those people wouldn't have been able to actually see them. So absolutely, the police's direction or guidance from that is you have your front windows clear, that's for sure.
Yeah. And does that also create visibility into the shop so that people on the street can see what's happening inside? So
again, if there was something happening inside, then somebody could see from the outside and call 111 and get us there sooner as well. You want to move away from sort of creating that cave environment where nobody knows what's going on inside, and no one knows what's going on inside or outside, basically. So.
Okay. Thanks. So what physical security measures do you think people should be taking? We've done a lot of talk about bollards and planter boxes and all sorts of things, but what do you recommend that retailers should be thinking about?
It's really a case-by-case basis in relation to what you really need. So have a look at the total crime that you're facing. So, for example, if your biggest issue is theft inside your store, then bollards or planter boxes probably aren't going to be much help in relation to that. But if your issue is ram raiding or people trying to burgle your store by smashing windows, then you might want to look at things like bollards and planter boxes. There's a few difficulties in relation to that. Council consent may be required if you're on a public footpath, and that can be tricky. But if you want any guidance in relation to that, feel free to contact your local police. We're happy to come out and have a quick look at that for you.
Security cameras are obviously something that's been around for a long time. Do you see those as being critical to the exterior of the store as well, in terms of tracking what's going on, and do they act as a deterrent?
There's very little evidence to suggest that they're a very good deterrent, but what they are really good at is recording evidence for police to take action in relation to prosecution of offenders. I can't emphasize strongly enough that we rely quite heavily on that for identification evidence moving forward. So externally of the store is really important. So again, you can see who's coming to the store, particularly if you have a parking or have parking to the side of your store, which you might not have visibility of from inside your store. And that's, again, it's crucial where you have your monitoring station for those CCTV cameras. So that monitoring station should be viewable from your counter or your point of sale counter where you're actually selling those goods from, so you can monitor it while you're serving people.
And you'd advise, would you, that you should record the content of those video cameras so you can come back to and have a look at it? And do you have a view? I know, you know, different businesses sometimes position their security cameras in different places. Sometimes they're up high, sometimes they're a bit more down at eye level. Do you have a view on where the best place is for them?
The only thing that I would say is that you need to have a very, very clear camera shot of the entry and exit of your premise, and that needs to be a very clear shot that police can use for identification purposes, basically. And then you might want to consider internal theft if that's a particular thing for you as well. So cameras on tills or point of sale. But as to visibility, the cameras are quite small these days, so they can be less visible, and it might be better to position a large sort of TV that's got all those monitoring stations up on a wall that somebody can see as well.
Okay, but you're ideally looking for a facial shot, a full-on front face shot of people who you might need to come back.
And the more high resolution, the better. Some of the CCTV footage that's out there, certainly the cheaper varieties, tend to be quite pixelated, and I'm sure you can understand that, you know, we need a relatively clear photo of that person to be able to identify them from. Okay,
thank you. And what about as people are coming into store? You've obviously got customers coming into store, and it's good practice to sort of greet them as they come in. From a crime point of view, do you have a view on that, and does that make a difference?
Yeah, crime exists in the dark, or exists alone. So if you shine a spotlight on it, however you do that, whether that is through lighting, I know we're going to talk about lighting soon, but one of the ways of doing that is talking to a person and interacting with them, and essentially offering them good customer service. So, you know, can I help you with such and such, or would you like a bag for that thing that you've just put in your pocket? You're not accusing somebody of stealing, so to speak, but actually just really having a conversation with them, and letting them know that you are engaged, that you are watching what they're doing as well. You're not always going to be able to deter the hardened, sort of more motivated people, but certainly the opportunists and the ones that are looking for that quick ability to grab something and go, you'll definitely deter them from doing that. And we see that as a success in the large companies like Bunnings and that have those media greeters at the front door.
Okay, and again, sort of lighting and visibility through the store is important. So whether that's security cameras or mirrors to see what's going on, you definitely advise to have those sorts of things in place. You definitely don't want to create dark corners, and you want to be able to see from your point of sale. You want to be able to see as best you can. I know that there's pillars and some things that can't be moved, but you really want to be able to see the entirety of the store. So shelf heights that are too high that you can't see people on the back of your store, you know, stacking things again on top of those shelves so you can't see. You really just want to create an environment that's open, that's full of light, and that people can't sort of hide away and complete their offending. We see multiple occasions in CCTV footage of where offenders will literally wait in a spot until there's no other staff around, and then they'll start committing their crime. So, okay. Is there anything else from the in-store experience that you'd be recommending retailers think about? There are several. I mean, there's several other options that are available to you from a deterrent perspective, or when an offence is occurring. There are things like sound bars, which emit a very high decibel sound that's quite offensive to the ears. So that will get people to go out of your store. And the other advantage to that is that it alerts people on the outside that something's going on as well. They also have fog devices as well, which shoot out a fog stream, I guess you could say. And we've got multiple examples of where that's been a very successful deterrent device. And actually, even if people are halfway through the commission of an offence, they'll stop and leave because you literally can't see the hand in front of your face. Those are expensive, or can be expensive options, but they're definitely worth consideration, that's for sure. Yeah. So, I mean, given the cost of those, would they be most useful for businesses that are at higher risk of particular kinds of offending, do you think? Or do they have a place sort of across the retail sector? I think if it's a concern for you and a concern for your staff, then that's worth considering, irrespective of the cost, because we know the benefit
it works. And the police are doing an initiative for small retailers to assist them with some of that funding. So, and those retailers are identified through a previous victimization matrix, because we know that once you've previously been a victim of crime, you're likely to be re-victimized because there's something about your location that's attracting the undesirable element to there. So we're rolling that out over the next couple of years, but it's really focused on the 1 and 2 person sort of micro style businesses within New Zealand.
Yeah. So information sharing is obviously an important part of crime prevention. How important do you think it is that retailers are in touch with other businesses and sharing information about what's going on?
I think that can't be underestimated, particularly in your blocks of shops that might have 5 or 6 shops or more in a little area. Sharing of people that have given you problems in the past, so that other people can be on the lookout for them. You know, information is power, basically. And again, we've seen multiple occasions where recidivist offenders that continually offend in the same style have been identified outside of stores, dealt with, and then moved on without problems. So yeah, those sort of information sharing groups are really good. That's for sure.
And are there privacy issues associated with those? You know, what's the risk from a privacy point of view if you're sharing information?
There is always a risk, but you can make a condition of entry into your building as to whatever you want. So as long as you've got signage around there that says that you may be sharing their image or their information with somebody else within your complex or group, then that's a consideration. It's a new section of law, so you would probably want to seek some advice in relation to that. It's not quite as cut and dry as the police say we can do it. It's very much, you might want to take some advice from the privacy commissioner or something like that along those lines.
And I'm sure the Retail NZ Advice Service can help too on some of those issues if you want to reach out to us. So look, Matt, are there other sort of practical things that you think businesses should be thinking about?
We spoke about lighting very briefly, but again, simple things like when you're closing up at night, just have a look at how dark the front of your store is. Again, putting light on the front of the store and removing the shadows is a really good deterrent. Make sure that you are locking and securing your business at the end of the day. That's really, really important. Often offenders will try doors to see if they're open, and then those opportunist ones will come in. And the real sort of risk times to consider are your opening and closing times. Those are because again, particularly more so at the end of the day, everybody's tired, everybody's been at work all day, and they just want to get home. And often those are the times that the offenders will strike because you're not as on guard as you possibly could be. So, considerations of when you're closing your store, the first thing you should probably do is lock the front door and secure it before you start doing any of the kind of the till stuff or any of the admin stuff that you wouldn't ordinarily do at the end of the day. Okay.
And when you've got sort of good old-fashioned shoplifting happening in store, are there particular things that you think we can do apart from kind of looking at those visibility issues and those camera issues to try and deter that? And what do you do when you find it?
That's always the difficult, and we've spoken about some of the preventative things that can be put in place in relation to fog cannons or the sound bars, or again the importance of removing the advertising from the front of your store. So really the key thing is prevention is better than trying to deal with it once it's happened. You don't want to be in a position where you're dealing with a potentially aggravated person that is unpredictable, and yourself or your staff might get hurt in relation to it. Our advice is, your staff's welfare or your own welfare is not worth the product that they're going to steal. I appreciate that there is a monetary value associated with that, but certainly someone's individual well-being is far exceeds that. So our advice is non-confrontational, de-escalation, and certainly if you're looking for some training in relation to that, I know Retail NZ has a whole lot of training on their website in relation to conflict resolution and de-escalation training, and I strongly encourage individuals to go through that training. It's empowering, and we have some really good evidential basis for that working. So
And look, obviously, Matt, it can be pretty difficult when you're dealing with some of these confrontational situations. And we've seen, over recent months, a big uplift in the number of sort of smash and grabs happening in store while businesses are open, and in terms of the general level of aggression and entitlement that perhaps some thieves display. There have been suggestions sometimes that retailers should arm themselves to, take on these guys, but you don't think that's a good idea.
You should never do anything that's going to open yourself up to any kind of potential prosecution or any kind of potential outcomes from that. Example could be if you say, and we had one in, was it Rotorua last week, in the weekend, when the guy had a golf club or a bat, and you essentially attack that individual protecting your store, and they, anything can happen with a baseball bat. You could hit them in the wrong place and they could pass away. And then, next minute you're in court on a manslaughter charge. So certainly let the police deal with it. If it's that, call 111. If they're being aggravated, we will attend. But yeah, just try the de-escalation. If the de-escalation doesn't work, then just make yourself as safe as you possibly can be. Think about situations around where your point of exit is at all times. You should never let an offender get between you and an exit point. Basically, you should always be thinking, how do I get away? What's my safe zone?
And equally, if a criminal, even if a criminal isn't armed, it sounds like you don't recommend chasing people out of store or trying to get the product back.
No, I definitely don't recommend that. But if you can, gather evidence for the police. So photographs of cars that they're getting into, anything like that, is really helpful. I think you touched on it a little bit before, but in general, the public's anxiety levels is probably the best way to describe it, is heightened due to a number of factors, COVID being one of them, cost of living is another one, and people are unpredictable at best at the moment. So just always keep in mind that you want to keep yourself as safe as possible. So,
okay. And again, we've been hearing a little bit about online fraud recently, where bad guys are using stolen credit cards and getting goods delivered to a location. Again, what's your advice here for retailers? Should we be trying to go and get the goods back?
Such a difficult one. Online fraud is very difficult, and the police are dealing with those fraudsters. They tend to be very high dollar value in relation to it. And as a retailer, you're probably not going to know at the point of sale when that's actually fraudulent or not, because a lot of them are very professional, a lot of them are very believable as well. So if you come across that information, then you just share it with the police is the best thing that we can do, and we'll attempt to recover those items, because we see it all the time. Facebook Marketplace and those other items as well are on those other various different social media platforms. So
yeah. So I mean, saying call the police is all very well, but often we do hear, well, police won't come to shoplifting. I know that you're more likely to be able to attend if there's some aggravation or some aggression going on. But what's your advice though for retailers who are just feeling that they're not getting the love they need from the police? There?
Yeah, so again, that's why my unit was set up basically, is to really address those high-end offenders that are causing the most harm to the retail sector, and we're definitely having some really good wins in relation to that, and we will start turning the tide in relation to that. But you used the word entitled before. These offenders have started learned behaviour over years of not being held to account for their actions. So it's going to take us a little while to kind of get that momentum again around that. And to give you some sort of really good examples, two offenders, they came out of prison. They were on our targeted list, and we had them back in prison within 3 weeks. So previously those people would have gone much longer than that without being dealt with. So these are the kind of things that we want to reteach them, that their behaviour is not okay, and there are consequences for their behaviour, and they'll be held to account.
Okay, so key message really is, if you've got an immediate situation where someone's threatening you, call 111. Otherwise, if there's theft or online fraud, report it to the police, either using the online reporting tool or Aura, if you've got it, or ring 105.
I wouldn't recommend ringing 105. definitely the best thing to do is the online reporting tool. That's just undergone a complete refresh. It's less than a month old since it's been refreshed, and the newer version is much more user friendly, and it'll streamline a whole lot of things. So we're just really conscious of the fact that you guys are busy, and sometimes waiting online for 10:05 for us to answer the phone is not really an option, versus the online reporting. You can come and go from it, so you can half complete it, go see the customer, come back, and it's a better way to do it.
Okay, thanks. And can we perhaps just have a quick chat about team members? I mean, most people on this call will have other people working in their businesses. What do you recommend as some steps to sort of support those team members and keep them safe as you're managing crime issues?
So we've kind of touched on it a little bit. Really, is the key is training. So from making sure all of your staff and your team are trained in de-escalation and conflict resolution and those kinds of things that are available. But also it's looking out for yourself as well, looking out for yourself and your other team members or staff within the building. So if you're in a retail store with 5 other people, then knowing where they are, having that communication. Consider things like walkie-talkies, essentially, so they can be communicating with each other if there are some sort of blacker spots within the store, and those areas which you should always have a person on, like the changing room areas, and they can communicate with the rest of their staff. So really the key is communication and making sure everybody knows who to talk to if there's an issue, and also that consideration around where your safe zone is, basically.
I mean, there's also been, quite a few incidents recently, pretty tragic incidents where there've been issues going on in shopping malls, for example, which haven't been in the stores concerned, but obviously create safety issues for both customers and staff. So I guess the message there is very similar. It's identify your safe spots, work out what your plan is, and close up if necessary.
Yeah, close up if necessary. That's for sure. And I'm aware of the ones you're speaking about. And yeah, you're right. The customers are as much at risk as anybody else in those situations as well. So usually those malls will have their own security teams, which will come down and start directing people on those kinds of things. But it definitely creates a problem. That's for sure.
Okay. All right, well, thank you for that, Matt. Those were all my questions. I guess I just open the floor now to any other questions that might be coming in. As I say, we've got a chat function there, so we've got no questions right at the minute, but if there's anything that anyone wants to ask, now would be a good time to pop the question into the chat. Just give people a moment to do that. But in the meantime, I guess I'd just like to remind everyone that we've got some really good comprehensive resources on the Retail NZ website. So retail.kiwi/crime, there's a whole range of resources, training material and other information that you can use to help both harden up your premises, keep you and your team safe and protect your stock. So I'd encourage everyone to go and have a look at those and check those out. And there's some e-learning modules available there as well. Now, look, sorry, we've got a couple of questions coming in now. First question was, how do we train and support our staff? So we've possibly dealt with that a little bit, but do you want to talk a little bit more about training the staff? I
think we kind of covered that.
I think. So de-escalation is kind of the key thing to be advising. Teach your teams how to de-escalate situations and not to go out and chase offenders and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, de-escalation includes things like body language and the kinds of phrases that you can use and those kinds of things as well. And it's really important that particularly our younger retail frontline staff have that kind of training because they haven't got the life skills and experience to be dealing with those kinds of things. And we know from experience that what you say to somebody is quite important, and certainly how you're standing or even how you're holding your hands can be really important as well. So, but those behaviours are learned through periods of time, and the younger people don't necessarily have those skills. So it's really important that we empower them through that training to do that.
Question from Larissa here. Does the online reporting tool on the police website, does that provide a tool for uploading camera footage? So you can just seamlessly upload anything you've got into the system. Do you have any tips on certain products that you sell, perhaps higher risk products like vaping products, cigarettes, potentially alcohol? How do you need to take extra steps if you're selling these things?
I think we just need to recognise that those are high commodity stolen items. So you need to look at your entire premises as a whole and consider points of weakness and try and location harden. I prefer to say deter crime from occurring at those places. We know that alcohol and vape stores is a high commodity stolen item, so you might want to consider things in those premises like bollards or concrete bollards, or grills or security screen on the glass, potentially a fog device or those kinds of things, because unfortunately they're a high commodity stolen item.
Okay, thank you. Question here from Tanya. What are your thoughts on personal alarms, and should they be used, and should they be silent or audible?
They should definitely be used, and they definitely should be audible. And we spoke about that before. One is if they're extremely loud, then they will actually deter that person, and that person will leave because it does actually hurt your ears. And the other thing is it attracts others' attention to your premises. If there's something going on and there's a problem there. So we're all a bit desensitized to car alarms going off, but we're not desensitized to burglar alarms and high audible alarms from premises going off. So they can only be a good thing. The beauty of those things is, unlike a fog device, they can be used multiple times without cost. Essentially, there's a one-up cost, and they'll go forever essentially, versus a fog device which needs to be refilled with fog stuff every 6 times that they use it. I don't know, fog, I was going to say fog things.
Yeah. And with those audible personal alarms though, I mean, if you're in an aggressive situation, you've got someone there wielding perhaps a knife or a firearm or something horrific, is it a good idea to set it off at the time?
Absolutely.
You set it off there, even though the person's right there with something.
You're raising awareness from externally what's going on. You also, particularly in the bigger stores, there may be people that are unaware in the store what's going on as well. So it'll raise awareness from the other staff that something's potentially happening as well.
Okay. All right. Question from Sarah: is the police program, which I think is the program about rolling out extra security for those high risk stores, is that just in Auckland, or is it rolling out?
It's nationwide. There is the vast majority of offending is within the Waikato and the Tamaki Makaurau regions. So there will be a lot of activity within those regions, but we are certainly looking nationwide in relation to this. Yes, it's not solely an Auckland problem.
Right, Michelle's asking about name badges and saying some of our younger staff feel a bit uncomfortable with their personal safety when they wear a badge with their name on it. Do you have a view as to whether name badges make you more vulnerable to unwanted attention?
Never been asked that before. The answer is no. I don't really have a view in relation to that. I'd be interested to unpack that a little bit more, Michelle, maybe offline. But yeah, I've not come across that. Have you come across it?
Well, I mean, I guess the question is really about how do you deal with unwanted attention, perhaps, or undesirable attention coming through in store, and that's there's a whole range of things there, I guess, that businesses need to be thinking about.
Yeah, and it probably goes back again to the training of those situations, whether they're trying to steal something from you or whether they're giving you unwanted attention. It's the same kind of techniques that you use to essentially deal with that person, and that might be one of those techniques might be to go and seek a safe zone.
Yeah, and I guess part of the issue in dealing with that potentially too is just around the messaging and the expectations that we're all setting for our customers. And we've got our Shop Nice campaign, which is all about encouraging people to just behave with some common humanity. So that may be something that might be useful there as well. Question from Nigel: do you recommend trespassing people from your store, and what's the best way to go about doing that?
Trespassing is a difficult one because it requires you to know that person's complete name, their date of birth, and their address, which is they're unlikely to give that to you. So it is an option that you can do that, but it's going to require a high level of compliance essentially from that person to give you the information that you need.
And I guess that's the follow-on question there from Aaron. Is there any advice for dealing with youth offenders who don't have a form of ID, but means you can't trespass them?
You can trespass them, and like there and then on the site, and you can advise them that they are trespassed. That wouldn't be able to be actioned by the police because there's no kind of formal paperwork essentially in relation to it. But that doesn't stop you from letting them coming into your store. You can still say to them, look, you're trespassed from here, you're not coming in, and you don't need a piece of paper or anything to do that. That's your authority as the landowner to do that, or the occupier to do that.
Okay. Right, question from Luke here about facial and number plate recognition, which is in the media often, of course. Will we ever get to a point where number plate recognition will be available to retailers to use as a preventative measure, or provide a heads up that it's a stolen vehicle?
The short answer to that is yes, and it's already being used.
Question then from Craig. Craig's an ex-police officer who now works in loss prevention, who has an offender known by name, he believes known to police, was observed removing a tool from a cardboard box and will have her prints on the box. Do you still have scene of crime officers who can take fingerprints, and what's the procedure for getting these items to you so that she can definitely be charged?
Yeah, we do have scene of crime officers that can come and do that. The question to me, to you, Craig, would be, if we already know who that person is, the value of printing that item is not great. Really, the key evidence from that is really the CCTV footage of her doing that, and then the identification statement from either yourself or one of your staff that says, I know this person to be XYZ.
Thank you. And then finally, a question about staffing shortages. So obviously across the sector at the moment and through COVID, we've got challenges finding employees and having people turn up to work because many people are off sick, which means there's fewer staff in store to watch customers. So what's the main step that we could take to combat theft if I don't have normal staff and levels in place?
I guess you need to consider, again, the safety of your staff, and you've just spoken about that. And if you're in a particularly big store, you might want to consider temporarily, if possible, closing down sections of the store because it's not manageable to have one or two staff members across a 100 square meter store, say, for example. Whether or not that's possible is up to you, but really, again, thinking outside the box. And I'm aware of several stores that have had to be closed at that particular day or a couple of days because they simply don't have enough staff to man it. So again, just that staff safety lens across everything to make sure that everyone's being as safe as they possibly can be is the real key thing.
Okay, and then final question then is around naming and shaming of people who have been seen stealing things in store, either by putting their pictures up on Facebook or posters in store and so forth. Do you recommend that? Do you have a view on that?
I wouldn't recommend that. It may bring additional aggression towards your store if those individuals are seen. Report it to the police. We will deal with it. That is what my unit does, that's for sure.
And I guess there's also a risk potentially around defamation. If you've got that wrong,
correct,
you potentially do expose yourself to civil liability.
Yep.
All right. Well, look, thank you very much. That seems to be the end of our questions. That's been some really good discussion. So thank you, everyone, for joining us this morning. Thank you, Matt, for coming along and giving us your time. We really appreciate your insight and your wisdom. I hope that's been useful for everyone. As I say, this recording will be available for people to come back to, and we've got lots of additional resources on our website at retail.kiwi/crime. So have a good day, and thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.